Welcome to Women's Sports Weekly, where women's sports happens every day, but we talk about it once a week. I'm Carolyn.
And I'm Danielle. Women's Sports Weekly is a podcast where we discuss the latest news, explore interesting stories, and share our love for women's sports. Follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Women's Sports Weekly Pod. Follow us and rate us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
And if you follow us on Instagram, we have new stickers.
Yes, different shapes this time.
Different shape. They're circle this time. They're very much similar to the last one. So if you have one from our last giveaway, you're not missing out on anything. But we did run out of our previous stickers, which is really great. That means there are 100 Women's Sports Weekly stickers in the wild. Now we have 200.
Nice.
So we are ready to give out some more. So follow us on Instagram at Women's Sports Weekly Pod, and we will drop the details on how you can get a new Women's Sports Weekly sticker. I feel like we are traveling nonstop, and I want to name this beginning segment, Where in the World Are the Women's Sports Weekly Gals? Is that too long?
I think it's very relevant, and all this travel is making me very tired.
Where were we this weekend, Danielle?
We got to explore a few different towns in southern Colorado. We stayed in between towns called Durango, Colorado, and Silverton, Colorado. Really beautiful area in the San Juan Mountains.
Yeah, it was our first time there. If you live in Colorado, you know that there are just sometimes when you drop into places, when you're driving through a pass, a mountain pass, where you drop in and you're like, oh my gosh, this place is beautiful. And that happened when we arrived in Durango. It was our first time there. And we got to stay at this cute, tiny little Airbnb that was a tiny home and had a hot tub and a sauna. This was actually a celebration for your birthday, but we couldn't find the time to do it with vacation and things like that. I know, first world problems, but we were able to find some time this past weekend to do that, and it was great.
So it was a lot of fun, very thankful, so thank you for planning it. I really want my own tiny home somewhere in Colorado, a little closer. I think 6.5 hours would be too much to travel all the time too, but would love a little mountain home somewhere.
I don't know if it's just us, but we play a lot of games of like, if we had a lot of money or if we weren't constricted by money, what would we do? And we, after staying in the tiny home, we were like, wow, having something like this, even this size, would be so great in a mountain town. We've been on a Leadville kick lately, and I think that would be great to have.
One of the cool things we did this weekend was go on a hike right near the town of Silverton, Colorado. And for those in Colorado, or if you're just have a traveling spirit and want to make your way down there, it was
Island Lake and Ice Lake via the Ice Lakes Trail.
This hike was incredible. I've seen pictures of the lakes before, but didn't actually believe a lake could be as blue as it was. And wow, I was just in shock.
The hike was difficult, and it was raining for the first
4 miles probably.
Yes. I was a little bit of a grump, but I knew that it could be worth it, and it was straight up. We had friends who had done it who had said this is a hard hike, and I didn't believe them, and I don't know why I didn't believe them, because it was really difficult. But we got to the top, had a beer, which is like my favorite thing to do, in this nice blue water. If it was a little bit nicer, I think we both would have jumped in.
So I wanted to jump in so bad, but it was way too cold with the rain, and I would have really regretted it. But you choosing not to believe a hard hike, you also did not believe in all trails. You kept saying, oh, it's under 2,000 in elevation, it's under 7 miles. I'm like, Carolyn, 8 miles over 2,000 feet of elevation gain. I don't know what you're looking at or what you're thinking through, but this is going to be a hard one.
And I think I need to lie to myself a little bit in order to get myself out there. So I think some part of my brain is like, we're not going to tell her the full elevation and the full mileage, or she won't get out there and do it in the rain.
We got through it. Another cool thing about these towns, I just love checking out the different spots to eat, even though sometimes the food isn't great. But the coffee, Colorado does coffee really well.
Yes, what Colorado lacks in food, they make up for in coffee in these small mountain towns, coffee and beer.
Yeah. But so cute. Really enjoyed the weekend there and just love to explore with you.
So we mentioned Leadville, that we would want to build a tiny home there. Can we jump into our highlights and talk about the Leadville 100?
We're a week late here in talking about this, but last weekend we had the chance to see the Leadville 100 for the first time ever. We have talked about ultra marathons on this podcast in the past. I've said before moving to Colorado, I only knew one person who did such crazy things out here. It's a big thing. The Leadville 100 is a historical 100-mile race. I've been wanting to go for years during that weekend, but it just hasn't worked out. And we finally got to go, and just the excitement in the town around leading up to the race, like Friday night, seeing people who were getting pizza before running the race. We were camping in a tent not too far from the 5-mile marker of the race, 5 miles and 95 miles. They started at 4 a.m. on Saturday morning, and at about 5 a.m., about an hour later, we started hearing loud cheering, and we were woken up and we were like, oh, the race started.
Crazy.
There's different belt sizes. They get belt buckles, and there's different sizes for the hours that they complete it in, and the cutoff for this particular race is 30 hours. Anyone who runs under 25 hours gets the big belt buckle, just to give everyone an idea of how long these people are out and about on the trail running this race.
And we had a full weekend in Leadville, and I was thinking about, they started at 4 a.m. We were sleeping. We got up, and then we did a hike that day. We did a hike that day.
We got lost.
We got
on
lost
the way to
on
the hike, and
Oh
then
my
we got
gosh.
lost on the hike.
Oh, I forgot about that. Totally blocked it out of my mind. We got lost on the way in the car. It took us an extra hour. Then we got lost on the hike multiple times. I mean, just absurd. They're still running. Then we get back from the hike, again, a long drive. We go and see people.
Well, first we ate lunch at Turquoise Lake, just chilled for a little bit.
Okay, then we had lunch. They're still running.
Then we went to one of the aid stations. The aid station, so this is an out and back race. We were seeing people on the way back.
I think we were at 75 or so.
This was later in the day Saturday, so that means we were only seeing the fast people run through this part of the race, because these were people on track to finish way before the 25-hour mark, which is super impressive.
We saw the second and third place at that time.
Who I really wanted to see, one of my favorite podcast hosts that I talk about all the time.
We should be, I don't know, we're doing ads for them at this point.
But how can you not talk about it? And I know this is a women's sports podcast, but David Roach, he broke a 19-year-old course record during this race. And when we went to the one aid station, I literally was like, I just want to see him. And we missed him. That's how fast he was running. To give everyone an idea of how fast he ran this race, he finished it in 15 hours, 26 minutes, 34 seconds, which was like 15 minutes, close to 20 minutes faster than this 19-year-old course record.
And he was running faster than I would ever dream of running a marathon on the road at.
Yeah, he was running under a 9:30-minute pace for 100 miles. Just, it was incredible. We did get to see him at the finish line, which was really cool. We'll get into the rest of the race, but I just feel like I cried so much that weekend watching people cross the finish line. Let's just continue on to give an idea. So that was at the 15:26 hour mark, and he finished in daylight that same day, which
so he finished around 7 o'clock. Started at 4 a.m., finished about 7 o'clock p.m., and that was a course record. That's how long he was running, a full day.
Yes. And then would love to talk about the woman who came in first place, Mary Denholm. She led the women. She now is the second fastest to ever run the course.
For women.
And she finished in 18 hours, 23 minutes, 51 seconds. Unfortunately, we were not still around at the finish line to see her cross the finish.
Well, because we were going to bed again.
Yes, exactly. She finished in the dark. Ann Trazen set the record in 1994 with a time of 18:06:24 seconds. So the record holder still for the women from 1994 and is about, 15 minutes faster than Mary Denholm, who ran it this year. It's just insane how long these course records can last.
It's strange to me that running records last for so long, because I feel like with increased technology, everything we know about nutrition and fueling and all that stuff, cross-training, that these running records, not only long-distance endurance running, but also these very short sprint times, I feel like people would start to beat them as we get smarter, and it's just not happening. These records are really difficult to break.
And I really just think some people are just built different, honestly.
For sure.
Denholm was so dominant in this race that the second woman to finish on that day behind her was Zoe Rom, and she was 3 whole hours behind and ran it in a time of 21 hours, 27 minutes, and 41 seconds.
Have you ever done anything for that length of period of time?
No. Have you?
Probably like ruminate on something I said 3 years ago. I've probably done that for 21 hours, 27 minutes, and 41 seconds.
Yeah, I can also think of, you've had surgeries in the past, and I had my Achilles surgery. I sat in my butt for that long after the surgery, but
that's about it.
Definitely wasn't doing anything active for that long. A few other cool things about Mary Denholm is she currently lives in Erie, Colorado, so not far from Leadville, and she ran in the Marathon Olympic trials this this year and in 2020. Very good marathoner. Her best marathon time is a casual 2 hours, 36 minutes, and 28 seconds. So she's no stranger to the sport.
I have spoken about ultramarathoners before and have been like, why do they do this? And going, it was really inspiring. I was not thinking that I was ever going to run 100 miles, but I was like, if I had the opportunity to crew someone and to help them along the way and to be there and to give them fuel and to make sure that they're doing okay, I would love that opportunity. I'm not giving you any ideas, but I just thought it was such an inspiring weekend to see people who are endurance athletes. Most people don't say when they grow up, I want to be an endurance athlete. I want to run 100 miles, at least not yet. The longest they'll say is like, I want to focus on a marathon. So to see people who have probably adapted over the years to make this their thing and then to do it, and the amount of time, not only that it takes for preparation, but the amount of time on the day of, I really loved it.
And to go a step further, so you have these dominant athletes in the sport who are finishing under the 24-hour mark. But let's talk about just the everyday person who runs a race like this.
Well, they're not everyday people. You're not an everyday person.
But when you think about it, they are. We saw a bunch of people with kids and what you would probably see on the street and just say that's a regular person.
For sure.
I understand what you're saying. No one is just getting up and running 100 miles. You are different. But my point is, let's talk about the back of the pack people, because those were also really inspiring moments. Like I said, Saturday morning, 4 a.m., the race started. With a 30-hour time cap, that meant it ended. The 30-hour time cap ended at, 10 a.m. the next morning?
10 a.m. on Sunday. So started at 4 a.m. on Saturday, time cap 10 a.m. Sunday.
We were sleeping when they started.
Yep.
We got a whole other night of sleep.
We woke up,
went into town, got coffee and breakfast, and then went to the finish line.
Yes.
To watch people finish.
We also have to point out that a lot of people don't finish the race, and you have to make certain markers, mile markers, by certain times, or you get DNF'd. You receive a do not finish.
Yes.
They do that for safety and also because they don't want people running out there for hours. Towards the 30-hour mark, you're only seeing the people at the end. Other people who have started the race but are going a lot slower were taken out at a different mile marker and told that they weren't allowed to continue.
The next morning, we got to watch a bunch of women and a bunch of men finish this race, and it was so cool because in a typical race, you don't see people outside of the bibs finish a race. In this race, you have crew, like some people had their whole crew finishing the race with them.
Yeah.
You had moms and dads with their kids finishing the race with them. I saw people carrying dogs across the finish line. And I just was getting emotional the whole time because I'm like, how cool would it be to be a kid watching your mom or dad finish this massive accomplishment?
Well, the kids probably don't even know. They're probably like, I was up for way too long.
No,
and I've been trekking
those kids
around.
were excited. They have some sort of idea. Or how cool is it for that parent to be able to share that moment with their family? I just was getting so emotional.
The kids might not appreciate it now. They'll appreciate it in 15 years.
For sure. So that was probably my favorite part, was seeing families finish together and just experiencing those emotions. What was your favorite?
I think similarly, the finish line, the attention at the finish line, the vibe at the finish line, everyone was so excited. In Leadville, they come down a hill and then they have to go up a hill to finish at the finish line. So you can see people at the top of the hill, probably a quarter mile out, and you're like, okay, they're coming. Let's get loud for them. I thought that was amazing. I was crying the whole time as well. I mean, any chance you give me to cry, I'm going to cry. As I said before, it was very inspiring to think about 100 miles. And I think about how long it takes me to drive 100 miles, and to see someone finish at the end, to be awake for 30 hours. I have no idea how you do that. If I don't sleep, I am not a human. And for them to do that, I was blown away.
Really inspiring. We hope to be there next year as well.
Also, we saw a lot of chafing. We saw penis chafing. We saw penis chafing, blood on shorts. And if that's a reason not to ever run a 100 miler, I don't know what else is, because that looked painful.
All right, let's move right along with that. Let's get into the WNBA. We are back in full action. I wanted to chat through the Minnesota Lynx versus Indiana Fever game. So the Minnesota Lynx beat Indiana Fever 90-80 last Saturday, and they clinched a spot in the playoffs with this win.
This was also a cool game because Maya Moore was there. Maya Moore played at UConn, played for the Minnesota Lynx. Her jersey was retired at this game. She has 4 championships with the Minnesota Lynx. She's a 6-time All-Star, and she only played in the WNBA for 8 seasons.
She is amazing player. Really cool to see her there.
And Maya Moore does a ton of work within the community. She spent years working on a case where someone was in jail who was wrongfully convicted, and she was able to get him out of jail and then ended up marrying him. He was at the game as well this past Saturday.
Really cool to see her there. I was really interested going into this game because the Fever have been kind of on a roll. They won the past 2 games prior to this, but the Lynx have also been on a roll. They have not lost a game since July 14th.
I mean, we say it all the time. The Minnesota Lynx are sneaky good. I don't know why we keep saying sneaky. They're just good.
Yep.
They're going to come to play and they're going to beat up on teams.
Yes. And at the start of the game, it's interesting because Nafisa Collier ended up being the leading scorer across all scorers. She actually got a foul in the first 15 seconds of the game. And usually I remember from my playing days, if I start off the game with a foul, my head is in the gutter and I'm just done because I'm already mentally messed up.
Well, in the WNBA, you get an extra foul too. So
still,
that's helpful.
It's just not a great way to start the game. But then she had 10 points in the first 5 minutes. So she clearly made up for it. She ended the game 12 of 18 from the field and ended with 31 points. Also, the game before this, she out-rebounded the entire Aces team. So she's just been playing incredible.
Yeah, and the Minnesota Lynx beat the Aces 2 times this past week. I mean, they are on a tear.
They looked really good. Excited to see their upcoming games. Their next game is tomorrow, Wednesday, August 28th at 10 p.m. Eastern versus Phoenix Mercury. So that should be another good game.
The other thing that I'm noticing while watching the WNBA after this break is that teams are coming back from the break out for blood. Mm-hmm. I have not seen more technical fouls than I have in this past week watching. Caitlin Clark got a technical foul. She got angry at something. She hit the WNBA logo underneath the basket and the referee teed her up.
I thought that was a weak call.
That was a totally weak call. So she did that. Sabrina Ionescu from the New York Liberty got a technical foul. She's usually not one to get a technical foul. Dejanay Carrington was beating up on my favorite player who is now signed with the New York Liberty, Jalen Sherrod, rookie. Both of them got technical fouls for that spat that they had together. Mm-hmm. Dejanay Carrington plays for the Connecticut Sun, Jalen Sherrod for the New York Liberty. And then Kennedy Carter of the Chicago Sky this past week was fouling former teammate Marina Mabry right in the face. Just the WNBA continues to be extremely physical. It's one thing that I'm noticing. I love it.
Yeah, and speaking of Jalen Sherrod, she used to be a former Buff, SCO Buffs. It's really nice to see her back on the floor because she originally was with New York Liberty out of college. Then they dropped her. Then they brought her back on, and now she is signed for the rest of the season. So I'm so happy for her.
I do not know Jalen Sherrod at all, but I feel like she's like my hometown hero because she's not even from Colorado, but because she played in Colorado and now is with the Liberty. I hope she has a really long career.
Same. So good stuff with the WNBA. Ton of more games coming up, so be sure to watch. We are getting closer to playoffs. Teams are clinching spots in playoffs. Really excited to get into playoff play.
For our deep dive today, we are going to talk about the new NWSL Players Association collective bargaining agreement with the NWSL. This new CBA includes revenue sharing, workload management, no trades without player consent, guaranteed contracts, free agency for all, minimum salary increases, and elimination of the draft.
This all sounds very exciting.
The NWSL is the first American major pro sports league to eliminate the draft. How do you feel about drafts?
I mean, I like them. I don't really fully understand the draw of elimination because I'm curious to see what the process is moving forward. I'm not that familiar with it.
Likewise, when I saw that the draft was being eliminated, I was like, hold on, but us Americans love drafts. We love to make things events. We love to talk and think about where people may go and who is going to get the top player and how is this player going to gel with this next one. But eliminating the draft does give more power to the players. They don't do drafts in Europe.
Okay.
Drafts is like a very American thing. And so because they don't have drafts in Europe, this results in the building of youth academies, of academies that are playing soccer, young kids, and they try to build them up so that when they get to an age where they're ready to play professionally, they can attract them because they've been working with them so long to come to their team.
That is interesting because I always forget soccer. You do start playing professionally in some cases a lot sooner than most other sports. So that when you say it like that, that makes makes sense.
And because the NWSL is expanding and because these Euro leagues do not do drafts, this is going to make the NWSL more attractive for global players to come play here.
Sure.
So there is that incentive as well. And then when we're talking about player health and power to the players, the decision to eliminate the draft and the expansion draft will allow young players greater flexibility in where they play. And teams are definitely going to need to step up now to create environments that appeal to players. So it does level out the power dynamic between the owners of a club and the players themselves, because they're not just going to be there. You're going to have to attract the players you want to come to your club. All NWSL players will become free agents when their current contracts expire. I was like, okay, what's a free agent? Free agency means that a player can negotiate a new contract with any NWSL club once their contract expires. So in the past, players had to wait 6 years, 5 years, play in the league for that long before they could become a free agent. So this allows them to be free agents when their contract expires. This will hopefully result in the fairness of contracts and create more of a dynamic where teams and players mutually agree to these contracts on even terms. So it's not just you're getting put on a team for a long period of time and you don't have any say. They're hoping that this will allow for more discussion within the contracts, which brings me into guaranteed contracts. So guaranteed contracts will prevent the league from terminating a player prior to the end of their term, except in limited circumstances. This also protects players in the event of circumstances beyond their control. So say a player is playing for a team, they have a contract, and they find out they have a heart condition and can no longer play. Their contract is guaranteed, and that ensures player safety, ensures player well-being. Under workload management, the new CBA addresses game frequency, travel conditions, and time off. It sets minimum standards for charter flights. I was looking through those minimum standards. They're still pretty low. It only covers 3 round-trip flights, and they have a lot of games in the season. That doesn't mean they can't do more, but they have to have at least 3 round-trip charter flights. And it requires that teams charter for certain midweek games. So games that are in the midweek but are very far away from each other, they're going to have a charter plane, which is great. I think they should all be on charter flights.
Yeah, for real.
Especially as things continue to grow and people become more popular. You can't have Trinity Rodman sitting next to me on a flight. I would talk her ear off. Players are also insured a mid-season break and a minimum of 28 days off during the off season. And then we get into revenue sharing. Revenue sharing, free agency, things that are all over my head. I'm going to try to explain this in layman's terms the best I can. So there is no individual salary cap within the NWSL, but there are team salary caps. So a team can only spend so much money across the board. If a salary cap is $3 million, they could give one player $3 million, which
I mean, that would be insane, but...
And they actually can't because they actually have minimums for what they have to provide people to. And then on top of that, when we get into the revenue sharing, there will also be a supplement to these salary caps based on prior year's media and sponsorship revenue. So now these players are getting a piece of the prior year's media and sponsorship revenue and adding it to the overall team salary cap, which will allow for more money to go to these players.
I love that. I think that's a great idea and good incentive.
The last part that I thought was very interesting was no trades without player consent. This is for both within the NWSL and to other teams in other leagues, because there are times where they'll grab someone from Europe and bring them in, and so they're not able to do that now without player consent. You can't just send someone off to Europe.
That will be interesting though, because if you want to trade someone and they say no, I can't imagine they're going to make that person's life great on the team if they want them out of there. Yes, in theory that sounds great, but is it going to be great?
Great points. And I think this is so historic, right? It's going to be a lot of like, okay, how did this work in the NWSL? What works? What's working well? What's maybe not? And then what can be adopted to our other women's sports leagues and maybe even beyond to our men's leagues as well? Because if this goes really well, this might be the new standard, right?
Yeah.
I was also thinking, because they have free agency, because they have guaranteed contracts, because they cannot be traded without player consent, I would be very particular if I was a player about what state I was playing in, especially with laws that are coming out on women's bodies and things like that. I would be very interested, and especially as an LGBTQ person, you would not find me first in line for a Texas or a Utah team. You just wouldn't. So I'm actually hoping that this new CBA pushes expansion into states like Colorado that are friendly friendly to women's rights and LGBTQ plus rights so that we can have players who actually want to play here.
Yeah, that would be incredible.
And I like that teams are going to have to step up and attract some players.
I also think it'll be interesting to see if one particular or two particular teams get really dominant because all the really good players are trying to go there. Like, what if everyone on the U.S. national team decide they wanted to go play for the San Diego Wave?
Well, they could, but there is still a team salary cap. So if you're the best player, you want to go and make the most money somewhere. Yep. So that hopefully spreads out. But yes, there is definitely an opportunity for a super team, especially with these free agencies, unless people sign into contracts that are very long, that ensure over a very long period of time, which because the contract is guaranteed, players might be more interested to sign a very long contract because they know no matter what they're getting it. So that might keep people in places as well. It's going to be so interesting to see how this all plays out. Let's get into what we're looking forward to this week. Danielle, I'll start with you.
I have been missing the Olympics. I'm sure other people have as well. Well, exciting. The Paralympics will begin Wednesday, August 28th. I personally cannot wait. Gold medal finals begin on Thursday, August 29th, and women's cycling on track and swimming on NBC. Be sure to look out for that schedule. What are you looking forward to this week?
I am looking forward to the U.S. Open tennis. It is here. The first round of the U.S. Open continues today on August 27th. It started yesterday from when we released. Yelena Ostapenko, who is ranked number 10, is playing Naomi Osaka today when we release, August 27th at 12:15 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN. Naomi Osaka is unranked, but we all know that she can come out big and swing hard, and Yelena Ostapenko is really good. So this is going to be a great first round matchup for the U.S. Open.
That's it for this week. We will see you next week on Women's Sports Weekly. In the meantime, watch women's sports. Rate and subscribe to the pod on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. Share the podcast with your friends. Keep sending us topics you want us to cover on Instagram at Women's Sports Weekly Pod. Thanks for joining us.
And don't forget to follow us to get your sticker.
Yes, more stickers are coming.